We shall fight in the fields and in the street. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
The Tommy's Trotters were indeed the first team to ever be created in Hogs of War. They're based off of the British Army from the First World War and are quite distinctive in their design and colour palette. In the very early days of the game's development, the personnel on this team were considerably different to today's game. You've got the likes of George, Arthur, Bob, John and William, Ernie, Jack, Percy, Jeremy and Simon, all very Britishy sounding names, but none were really that hard hitting. None really stick in your mind unless, I don't know, Bob maybe? Bob. Back in the early days of this game's development, you could only be the Tommy Trotters. Even if you picked a different team, they would still be shown as the British because that was the only texture that had been made at this point for the individual teams. If you think about the uniform and the colours used for each team, they have never really changed. Maybe, one or two classes have changed in their look or design and a little bit of colour here and there. I'll be talking about those kind of things in future videos, but overall, each team hasn't really changed that much. As time then progresses on and we move into this cuter stage of development where the pigs have these like rosy cheeked faces and their overall model design and landscape design is completely different. The teams themselves haven't changed, their uniforms are the same, and I feel like that's the main part of the game that they took and developed on. Like, the teams are there, so let's get everything else around it sorted and then go from there, It's not until the alpha stage of development that we start to see a dramatic shift towards character and world building, and there's one key figure within the Tommy's Trotters team that stands out the most. Albert. For those of you who don't know, this crazy dude over here is Albert, and the game tells his story of being attracted to war and wanting to go off to war and fight for his country because he sees it as just a great joy, and really the reality turns out to be something different. As many fans will know, there is of course a little secret animation that you can watch if you punch in a specific cheat code, and that basically shows the second half of this animation because most of it had to be scrapped due to size limitations, which is talked about by Jacob in the Retro Hour podcast. If you haven't heard it yet, I suggest you go check it out because it's pretty awesome. But this does raise the question, was the primary focus going to be having like a main character in the single player campaign? Because in a way the single player campaign is a story mode. You have your squadron of pigs and you do things with them and you achieve certain objectives, so having this individual character as well as having him in some kind of animation really brings the world to life and brings this universe of anthropomorphic pigs fighting each other into the fold a little bit more.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
I think the easier thing is to assume that Albert was going to be a part of your squadron if you picked the Tommy's Trotters team, and that in itself is pretty cool because when you pair that with the animation that you see before you even start playing the game that shows the story of Albert, or at least some dude called Albert, you have a relationship there between animation and game that's been used throughout a lot of different games, TF2, Overwatch, that use animated shorts to introduce the game, introduce the universe, and get you engaged and wanting to play the game. For me, as a 3D character animator, it is kind of a no-brainer that an animated short is the easier option to display to everybody what the hell is going on in this game. You can't do as much storytelling with just gameplay animation or character animation in-game. It has to be done somewhere externally. But the downside to that, of course, is that animation takes a long time, it can cost a lot, but it's sad that it didn't actually come down to that. It was because of the lack of space on the PS1, and so not all of the animation could be used. But I'm glad that they snuck it in there at the end so that Albert can kind of live on, and so that his development as a character can never be forgotten in this game. Moving into the present then, and the only person to have survived the culling, I guess, of individual character names is Percy. He is the only survivor of the original set of character names for the Tommy Trotters, which is pretty interesting, but it's also pretty fun to note all the characters that they did come up with for the final release. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the story of the Tommy's Trotters. I see these guys as being kind of unique in that they're the poster boys of Hogs of War. They're the default team that you see the most, similar to that of Red Team in TF2. They're shown more than Blue Team, so they're kind of the face of the game, if you will. But I want to know your thoughts on this team in the comments below. Please let me know, and especially people who don't have or don't play the English version, how do the British team come across in other languages? I want to know your thoughts. As always, we'll get discussion going like we usually do, and in the meantime, I will catch you guys later for the next one.
Destination going.